Hey, you know what? Let's do some black politics. Yeah, urban politics. Okay. The Compromise of 1877. The Republican Party made a deal with the Democrats, abandoning Reconstruction, kicking Negroes out of their congressional seats, and leaving Negroes to fight mob purges and lynchings alone. The Lily White movement was an anti black political movement within the Republican Party in the United States in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. It was a response to the political and social economic gains made by African Americans following the Civil War and the 13th Amendment to the Constitution, which eliminated slavery and involuntary servitude except as punishment for a crime. During Reconstruction, black leaders in the South gained influence in the Republican Party by organizing blacks as an important voting bloc via union league. Oh, Nick, I know you hate this, but unions. Union leagues and the biracial black and tan faction of the Republicans. I've been saying about biracials forever. They understand your worth. Why don't you? Conservative whites attempted to eliminate this influence and recover white voters who had defected to the Democratic Party. The Lily White movement proved successful throughout the South and was a key factor in the growth of the Republican Party in the region. Boy, this is a lot to read. Okay, immediately following the war, all of the southern states enacted black codes, laws intended specifically to curtail the rights of the newly freed African Americans. Many northern states enacted their own black codes, restricting or barring black immigration. The Civil Rights Act of 1866, however, nullified most of these laws, and the Federal Freedmen's Bureau was able to regulate many of the affairs of southern black men who were granted the right to vote in 1867. Groups such as the Union League and the Radical Republicans sought total equality and complete integration of blacks into American society. The Republican Party itself had held significant power in the South during Reconstruction because of the federal government's role. During Reconstruction, Union Leagues were formed across the South after 1867 as all black working auxiliaries of the Republican Party. They were secret organizations that mobilized freedmen to register to vote and to vote Republican. They discussed political issues, promoted civic projects, and mobilized workers opposed to certain employers. Most branches were segregated, but a few were integrated. The leaders of the all-black units were mostly urban blacks from the North who had never been enslaved. What? What? Never been enslaved? How is that possible? How, Sway? How? Fascinating. During the 19th century, a small number of African Americans were elected to the United States Congress. All were members of the Republican Party. In the South, the party was a voting coalition of freedmen, freed slaves, carpetbaggers, derogatory term used by Southern whites for recent arrivals from the North, and scalawags, which is funny because people apply this term to women, but it's a derogatory term describing those Southern whites who had been loyal to the U.S. during the Civil War. In the South, the Republican Party gradually came to be known as the Party of the Negro. In Texas, blacks comprised 90% of the party members during the 1880s. The Democratic Party increasingly came to be seen by many in the white community as the party of respectability. The first KKK targeted violence against black Republican leaders and seriously undercut the Union League. These are your first black Republican senators. Senator Hiram Revels of Mississippi, 1870. Benjamin Turner, Alabama, 1871. 1871, Robert Carlos DeLarge, South Carolina. Josiah Walls of Florida, 1871. Jefferson Long, 1871 of Georgia. Joseph Rainey, South Carolina, 1870. And Robert B. Elliott, South Carolina, 1871. Oh, is that what it? Oh, for real? I didn't know that. Let's continue. Okay. By 1890, with a few brief exceptions, the Democratic Party had gained control of all state legislators in the South. From 1890 to 1908, Southern states accomplished disenfranchisement of blacks, and in some states, many poor whites. During the first 3 decades of the 20th century, no blacks served in the U.S. Congress due to their disenfranchisement across the South. Black leaders were barred in 1922 from the Virginia Republican Congressional Convention. The state had imposed racial segregation in public places and disenfranchised most blacks by this time. At the national level, the Republican Party made some attempts to respond to black interest. In 1920, Republicans made opposition to lynching part of their platform at the Republican National Convention. Lynchings of black women and men in the South had increased in the decades around the turn of the 20th century. Leonidas Dyer, a white Republican representative from St. Louis, worked with the NAACP to introduce an anti-lynching bill into the House, where he gained strong passage in 1922. One of the black and tan partisans, there you go, you mix folks, there y'all go. One of the black and tan partisans who continued to hold appointed office was Walter Cohen of New Orleans, the customs inspector and later comptroller of customs. He gained appointments from 4 Republican presidents and continued in office through the McCalvin Coolidge administration. During an NAACP National Convention in 1926, the delegates expressed their disappointment with the party. Lily White black and tan factionalism flared up in 1928 when Herbert Hoover tried to appeal to upper-class Southern whites, and again in 1932 as the New Deal coalition built by Franklin D. Roosevelt began to attract African-American voters to the Democratic Party. There's y'all death knell, and there's where y'all went wrong. It ain't been right ever since. Due to Democratic support of the Civil Rights Movement and congressional passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965, the shift of African Americans toward Democratic candidates accelerated. The Lily White movement still in charge, their leadership, the infrastructure, and the neocon think tanks. Understand that the way conservative is used to describe those in the Lily White movement is the academic misnomer conflated with racism and Christian nationalism. It is not in reference to personal conservatism, social conservatism, or conservative principles of governance. There have been many populist movements over the years in an attempt to displace this cohort, as they really don't represent the average conservative Republican voter, but they have the power. We never lost the black vote. We abandoned it at a time when we were 90% of it. Like all constituents, black voters moved towards those actively seeking their votes. They were activists and ideological Marxists who pushed this transition from the left as well. Had the Republican Party not acted like an absent father and abandoned black voters, we would not be abused by the single mother we call the Democratic Party. Ouch. Think about how bad it is that even during this forced exodus from the Republican Party, the vast majority of black voters still voted Republican, especially in the Dixiecrat South, where Democrats had a stronghold up until the 80s.